Should you pull for Yuffie's FR and BT, her roles are going to be a debuffer, dispel, cleanse, and a battery. Let's start off with her attacks. Mine now, her skill 1, it is 6 HP attacks with 150% splash. It steals 2 buffs from the target. It increases her brave by 100% of the target's current brave, and it grants more brave by 50% of her own max brave. I don't need this. Her skill 2, it is 4 split HP attacks. It is guaranteed hit. It transfers her own debuffs onto the target and extends them by 5 turns. It grants the party brave by 50% of her own max brave. It cleanses 1 debuff from all the allies, and it grants her buff, phew, perfect, for 8 turns. Gauntlet, her EX, her most simple move to be honest. It is 7 HP attacks with 100% splash, and it inflicts group no cheating for 2 turns. Doom of the Living, her LD, it is 7 split HP attacks. It gives 1 free ability use. It dispels 1 buff from all enemies. It grants everything mine for 10 turns, and the move has a brave refund effect for 10% of the HP damage dealt. All Creation, her BT, it lasts for 6 turns in which it gives a party HP cap up of 5% per debuff, so the max is going to be 40%. It has a really cool effect in which whenever it's active, any inflicted debuffs will not decrease turns. Essentially, the debuff is going to be indefinite. And lastly, her BT effect transforms her HP attack to Landscaper. Briefly describing what Landscaper does, it is a 9 AoE HP attack move, which also extends her own active buffs by 1 turn. So you can spam this move without having to worry about any buffs running out. I'm adding a new section into the Should You Pull, so let me know what you guys think about this. Let's go into what her buffs and debuffs do. Few, perfect for 8 turns. It grants Yuffie a speed up of 30%. Her other buff, Everything Mine, it extends all of her inflicted debuffs by 2 turns. And lastly, No Cheating, her EX debuff, makes it so the enemy cannot grant themselves buffs, nor can they grant Brave besides Stolen and Natural Initial Recovery. Her Force Conditions, you're getting a 20% whenever anyone's breaking or attacking a broken target, another 20% whenever Yuffie breaks or attacks a broken target. The third condition, you get a 5% per debuff on the enemy whenever you're acting. The max of that is going to be 40%. Yuffie's pros, her debuffs not expiring while her BT is active is very good. If you tack this onto her EX debuff, which is itself very good, as long as her BT is active, unless they directly cleanse it, you're going to have a very good debuff on the enemy, given that Yuffie's mechanic allows her to steal buffs from the enemy. When you steal the right buffs, it will make her, in particular, break the game. Keep in mind, with some Shinryu fights, the enemies will give themselves quite broken buffs. For example, Hell House. Yuffie can take that for herself, and herself will be invincible. Is it the most practical thing in the world? No. But the fact that the possibility is still there, it means even if you don't regularly use Yuffie, when those bosses show up every now and then, Yuffie is going to be very good against them. Another great thing about Yuffie is you don't have to worry about filling up the debuff quota very much. Ideally, you're going to want to inflict onto the enemy better ones with other party members, but if you can't and you just need to fill the quota and you have enough support in your team already, Yuffie's generic debuffs are going to be just fine. And because she gives a lot of generic debuffs at a time, you can use them to easily push off non-framed buffs. It's not very often you see this. Again, like her stealing buffs mechanic, it might not happen a lot of the time and it might not be the most practical, but the fact that she's able to do it's good. The cool thing about Yuffie now is she's actually very viable to deal high damage, especially with Landscaper dealing 9 AoE HP attacks. That's the same as Renoa, and that's the same as Machina, if you don't include his off-turn damage. Can she be your main DPS? You might have to work around it a little bit, but it's possible, I suppose, if you can time it properly and you have the right off-turn damage to follow. I do think her main role is still going to be that of a utility and a third-party member. I still think it's great, though, that she does good damage now. Another pro that I really do think is kind of important, although meta-wise it's not very important at all, the act of taking buffs and returning debuffs onto the enemy is actually pretty fun. Upper Omnia is a video game after all, and what's the #1 thing you should do in all video games? Have fun. Sometimes, instead of just preventing buffs or debuffs outright, taking what the enemy gives themselves and giving what the enemy gives you, that mechanic is pretty refreshing. The only other person who does that, to my knowledge, is Balthier. If you didn't get Balthier and you want someone who kind of does what he does, Yuffie's right here. Lastly, and I do think this is a very important pro, Yuffie's a great farming unit if you don't have any good ones already. I do think getting a unit specifically for farming isn't a waste of resources at all. It's going to make your life easier. It's going to make your grinding much faster and less stressful. And I think it's a legitimate reason to pull on Yuffie. The great thing with farming is you don't have to go all the way up to her BT and FR. You don't have to do all that. You can just go up to the LD, which is very easy nowadays. You can just build up to that, and then she's a very viable farming unit. Moving on to Yuffie's cons. Her BT effect is short. I don't care how good her BT is. It doesn't justify having 6 turns. It should have had 8. Landscaper, as strong as it is, it's not the most broken move in the world. It definitely would not break the game if she had 2 more turns with it. And also, looking at the BT effect itself, like, her debuffs aren't that broken. She doesn't have a Raijin debuff. She doesn't have a Setzer freeze. She doesn't have HP silencing. Indefinite debuffs, while it does sound really good, and it is really good still, it's not breaking the game. It doesn't justify giving her 6 turns. I truly believe she should have been given 8, especially when you look at other BTs who have more than 6 turns and are just as broken, if not more. Iris! Another con with Yuffie, her being a debuffer, it's not as bad as other debuffers. However, it is still worth mentioning. If the enemy cleanses themselves a lot, it's going to be a bit difficult for Yuffie because her doing her highest amount of damage and utility, you need pretty much the max amount of debuffs onto the enemy as you can. Again, it's not hard to do with Yuffie. All you pretty much need to do is do her skill 2 and then the enemy is filled. That's it. However, if they cleanse themselves a lot and Yuffie's BT is up, remember that it's only 6 turns and you only have a short time frame to deal as much damage as possible with her. Having to use her skill 2, which is significantly weaker than Landscaper, it's pretty inconvenient when you have to deal with that. Whenever Yuffie's BT is up, you pretty much just want to spam Landscaper 24/7. You don't want to worry about utility anymore because it's so short. Her FR is generic, so a lot of people can fill the max numbers. However, it's still pretty weak. Whenever Yuffie moves, it's pretty much an 80% guaranteed. Whenever anyone else moves, yes, they are getting full numbers, but it's only 60% a turn. It's not really up to par with top tier FRs nowadays. Unless you're going into a Yuffie BT phase, I don't recommend using her FR as the main. Definitely use it as an echo only. And lastly, with Yuffie's cons, she has no full cleansing or dispel option. The most she can do, dispelling really, is her skill 1, which steals 2 buffs from the target, and her LD, which dispels 1 buff from all the enemies. It's good. It works a lot of the time, but it's not a full dispel by any means. And if you look at her cleansing options, the most she can do is cleanse herself fully and cleanse only 1 debuff from her allies. It still works. However, there are so many options that you can cleanse your party with, even with calls, and also a dispelling option. I don't know why they didn't just give her the full dispelling and cleansing, given that her entire kit works around buffs and debuffs. I don't get it. This is going to be another fun section I include in my videos. Is the BT necessary? Let me know how you guys feel about this section in the comments below. Do you need Yuffie's BT in order for her to do what you want her to do? It depends. With her BT active, it gives Yuffie's main form of damage, Landscaper, and her indefinite debuff effect, both of which are very obvious highlights of her kit, but her functionality as a buff stealer, debuff giver is overall the same, even if you don't have her BT built. If you're mainly focused on utility, you could care less about Yuffie's damage. You're just gonna delegate that to a main DPS in your party. Yuffie will still work great. My should you pull rating for Yuffie all in all is going to be an A. Her damage was given a very much needed upgrade, and in my opinion, she's one of the more fun units to play in this game. However, her weaknesses are very apparent to me, and that keeps her from that A+ to S ranking. That's going to be my should you pull video. Thank you guys so much for watching with me. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!